Hello, everyone. We'll get started. So just a reminder to everyone with microphones, everyone will have them if you're going to speak. Please be sure to turn them on to make sure that everyone in the audience can hear you, but also viewers at home through the streaming service. I call this meeting, it's a special meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to order at 7:02 p.m. And Terry, could you please take roll of the members present?
Mr. Hayes.
Here.
Ms. Holliday.
Here.
Ms. O'Donnell. Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Shepherd. Ms. Urban. And Mr. Weiss.
Here.
Thank you very much. So we have 4 members present, which means we have a quorum. Before we proceed, we have an agenda in front of us. Were there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much. We have no minutes to approve because this is a special meeting. But we do, the next section is written communications, and I do see here 3 printouts of emails, all sent today, Wednesday, February 18th, between the first 8:48 this morning and the most recent 5:09 p.m. this evening. The first 2 are from our own Commissioner Dennis Roberts. The third is from Sarah Scott. Would you like me to read these out loud? I did that last time. Okay. One of them, this is from Dennis Roberts, sent to Terry Andel. Terry, this article that appeared in the November 8, 2025 copy of the News Gazette ought to be added to the input to the study session tonight as relevant background information. Dennis, and this is the article by Hannah Wiersma, November 8, 2025, News Gazette, titled Former Urbana Civic Center, MTD Still Looking to Build Transfer Station at Former Urbana Civic Center. Many people have read the article. I certainly have, so I don't think I need to do that now, but okay, thank you. The second email sent at 9:58 from Dennis Roberts to Terry and Olivia Javine. The subject, add to record of public input. Terry, I have received the following messages regarding the Urbana Civic Center via the HEUNA. I know how to say it for WUNA, but HUNA?
HUNA works.
HUNA. All right, thank you very much. Facebook.
Say it again,
page. HUNA. All right, there we are. One remark from Julie Watkins. I like the idea of a bus depot in downtown Urbana. I prefer repurposing to demolition. Building new would mean more carbon footprint. I also like the building and would be sad to lose it. And then input from someone named Richie Drennan. So many good memories of the building. There were 14 likes on this. And then there's a post here which is from Dennis, just notifying people about the meeting this evening, the special study session. So thank you for entering that into the record. The third email from Sarah Scott, sent at 5:09 p.m. To the planning email address, subject, Historic Preservation Commission, public input on Urbana Civic Center building. Hello, I apologize for the lateness of these comments, but I hope they will be received and counted. I cannot attend tonight's meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to hear the presentation about the Urbana Civic Center and proposed transit center. I hope that the Urbana Civic Center can be preserved for adaptive reuse and incorporated into the plans for the proposed transit center. It is such a wonderful and special building in the mid-century modern style, and I have missed being able to go into the building since it stopped hosting events. I hope that this building can be preserved and used once again. Thank you, and please do consider and enter or read these comments into the public record. Sincerely, Sarah Scott. So thank you, Sarah and Dennis, for those communications. I'm not aware of any other written communications. Great. Okay, thank you. So now we proceed to the audience participation section, where if anyone in the audience would like to address the Historic Preservation Commission on any topic, you're allowed 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to speak on that topic. The qualification is that there's no replies, comments, or questions from the commission members. So we hear you, what you have to say, but we don't then engage in dialogue about that. So, and this is aside from anyone who's speaking in the study session. Is there anyone who would like to? Thank you very much. So,
I just have a few housekeeping notes on public participation. We ask that you sit at the table in the front and sign in. There should be a piece of paper there. You can sign in and use your, just write your name there. And then I will be using the 5-minute timer. It's a little finicky, so I may walk over to the other side and so that I'm closer to the clock, but please ignore me. I don't mean to interrupt you if that happens. So once you sign in, I'll begin the timer.
Thank you for activating the timer, because my personal timer is not as accurate, and I know that from the last meeting. Thank you.
As a backup, I can use a cell phone, but.
Excellent. All right, thank you. So Karen, I'm sorry. Hi. There's a button to push to make it.
Okay.
Great.
Hi, my name is Karen Medina, and I live in Champaign. I am here this evening because I know of Professor Altschuler's some of his previous work, and I just wanted to come and support it. And I am very impressed with the things that I have seen in the past. His sense of community, his sense of gathering things together and making it part of the community and for the community. And I really appreciate the fact that he is doing this with his class, or has done it with his class, because was it this past fall or this coming fall? Because two different dates, 2025 and 2026. And I just wanted to say that I am very hopeful also in seeing that that site is used. It has been a shame that it has been sitting there for so long, and nothing has been done with it. So I just wanted to really say that if you get a chance, please do look into Professor Altschuler's past work. It is amazing. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the commission?
Could you please turn your microphone on?
Is it not on? Is your microphone not on? Apparently. Maybe just make it a little closer.
Oh,
I
there we
don't know who
go.
called that
Okay,
out.
thank you.
Is that the,
All right.
I
Well,
was having trouble hearing.
Okay. So they worked and worked and worked and met with the architects, Smith, Seaton, and Olak, in order to try to cut $30,000 out of the budget because funds were hard to acquire. Remember, the Civic Center was meant as phase one of a three-phase complex that would be everything to everyone in Urbana, including a swimming pool and a movie theater and all these things. And I think they threw everything at the site, hoping that someone would be excited enough to give a lot of money. And of course, all they ever got to was phase one. So, but they said it'll be, it's serviceable, and it is comparable, and was comparable to any church basement, any reception area. So, let's see, what do I want to do next? The problem was, and of course, let's set it in context too, that at the time that it was built, and it seemed kind of odd for downtown Urbana, but it wasn't really when you think about the fact that the Garvey House was 1955, Cranard Art Museum, 1961, the Urbana Presbyterian Church, 1964, Erlanger, 1964, Granville Keith, 1964 on Pleasant Street, and the Civic Center then in 1970. It was just part of a movement of modern architecture that was really lighting up neighborhoods in our communities. So it wasn't that odd at all, and it wasn't obtrusive. It was the same height as Montgomery Ward's and the bank and everything around it. In fact, there's the charming picture of it being built with the old feed mill behind it, and that's what looms over it. It's a wonderful photo. So that was fine, and it was popular, and it was well used. It was always at capacity, but it never really had a good manager or someone to market it. And then, of course, we start getting venues, and that gave a lot of competition. The high money rentals went to venues instead of something like the community center. In 1980, then the bank decided to put up what became the County Bank Plaza, which 5-6 stories, looming over downtown Urbana, almost as tall as the courthouse tower. And that basically blocked the Civic Center out of view. You could not ever drive down Main Street and see it anymore because that was blocking it. May I have a couple extra minutes, please? I am part.
Yes, the chair is able to grant 3 minutes of extra time per Article 7 in the bylaws.
Yes, granted.
Thank you. Okay. And so it was easy then to ignore. And let's add to that the fact that the businesses that were on Main Street, this is the Urbana Business Association that's running it, they wanted the Park District to take it. The Park District said, we can't afford it. That would take everything we have in our budget, and so it needed to go to the city. And that's where it kind of languished. Okay, as long as it could just take care of itself, that was fine. But certainly in the last administration, they really didn't care for it. I understand, though, the fact that we had a downturn in the economy that was really awful in the 2008, 2009, and Governor Rauner's budget cuts, and the fact that we had the tax fight with Carl. All of these are factors that come in to wanting to get rid of the Civic Center. Let me cut to the chase. We deserve better than just tearing this down and sticking up another 3-story brick building. When the jail is sitting there, a whole block of jail sitting there doing nothing. And if we leave it to the county, What we'll get is another paved parking lot. Urbana's ringed with them. We either have 3-story brick buildings or parking lots. And this is a time to finally do better and realize this greenway that we want to bring people from the farmers market to downtown and loop around and make it friendly, because there could be a reconfiguration of streets. There's alternate sites that were cited by the city that were specious. I mean, H Mart was an alternate site, Schnucks was an alternate site, all these businesses. Sorry, real dry. But actually, you've got a big parking lot on Illinois Street. There's a huge lot there that the city wants to do something with. But really, the Civic Center, with its proximity to the courthouse, these would all be, it would be a better thing. But it should be either the entrance or that is the transit hub there, and then build on the jail site. But by all means, the county is not a good, it doesn't care really about beautifying downtown Urbana. So the PACA position is that we reuse, we save it, we reuse it, and that's it. I think that's it in a nutshell. Do you want a copy of what I've got now?
We'd love that. Thank you very
Okay.
much to have that, if you have that typed up, to enter that in the record.
May I just
That'd be
give it
great.
to you?
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
for Terry. Thank you, Phyllis. Would anyone else like to address the commission presently? No? Last call. Okay, before we go into the study session, is this on? Yeah, okay. The agenda does include a staff report. Is there a staff report to share with us?
No staff report at this time, but I do want to amend my previous statement. There is a correction to the agenda as provided. Under study session item number 2, it's actually fall 2025 course,
Right.
not fall 2026 course. So I apologize for the confusion and thank you for the catch.
Okay, thank you very much. So, so we'll go now into the study session, and that about the Urbana Civic Center at 108 East Water Street and section 106, and we'll begin with a staff presentation.
Okay. Okay, good evening, commissioners and members of the public. Tonight, we're holding a special meeting specifically for this study session on the Urbana Civic Center located at 108 East Water Street, and review of the proposed project to date with a special focus on the Section 106 process. This topic was initially presented on Wednesday, February 4th as part of a staff report in the regularly scheduled Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and the commissioners determined that a study session would be appropriate to have a more robust discussion around this topic. Staff prepared the following handout for this study session, which is a further expansion and iteration on the document that was circulated in the February 4th meeting. So commissioners have that in front of them, and there are also copies made available in the back for the public. This information was compiled internally and also in partnership with MTD, using timelines that their consultants had helped prepare. And the materials summarized in this handout are extensive, covering nearly a decade of conversations, and incorporate highly technical procedures. Therefore, this document is iterative, and staff respectfully ask that the document be treated as such, just so that we can keep expanding on this analysis. So we will start this evening with my presentation, which will just walk through the handout, and then we will be joined at a later after this by Professor Joseph Altschuler, who is the professor at UIUC, and then also Ashley McLaughlin of MTD will be joining us as well. So, I think we're excited to talk about the course. It explored blue sky thinking on the proposed bus terminal at the Urbana Civic Center, an incorporation of civic and transit uses. So, but more on that later. For the staff presentation, I'll walk through the handout. And then I do want to note that the supporting materials that are provided in addition to that handout are also available in the back for the public, but those are excerpts. Those documents exceed 100. The facilities master plan is 40 pages. The CIPs are almost 100 pages. So just in the interest of not printing a whole forest, we've just printed excerpts that highlight the section that specifically talk to the Civic Center. Those documents can be shared digitally in their entirety or I think in most cases found on the website, but happy to share them as well. Okay, so I think just, although this might be a little boring, I think we should just walk through the handout from the beginning, and if there are any questions or we want to, or if commissioners would like to ask for further information, we can do that. So we'll start at the beginning and work our way through the document. So in the interest of starting really at the beginning, in June of 2018, the City Council votes to close the Civic Center. That was effective December 31st, 2018, and was part of that fiscal year's budget approval. Any questions? No. In July of 2020, the City of Urbana's facility master plan states the cost of repairs and upgrades needed to bring the Civic Center up to date greatly exceed the current replacement value. The master plan considers divesting the land from the city ownership through a public RFP process. That was in 2020. The facilities master plan was presented to council, I think, several times. It did correspond with the onset of the, I believe the first presentation was May 2019. It kind of corresponded with the onset of COVID, and so many meetings were moved online. But that facility master plan was discussed publicly in council. Any questions? And you do have the excerpt of the facilities master plan in front of you. That's the landscape document, printed in landscape. In June of 2023, the City of Urbana Capital Improvement Plan, which we often abbreviate to CIP, was produced for fiscal years 24 to 28. And that capital improvement plan lists the Urbana Civic Center as a capital project backlog. The plan proposes the city to pursue divestment of the site from city ownership and consider possible public-private redevelopment. So you'll see that as an excerpt as well in your handouts. In March of 2024, as part of MTD's proposed project, MTD and the Federal Transit Authority initiate an environmental review process in compliance with NEPA. And the kickoff meeting for that is held in March of 2024.
I got a question. Are you accepting questions?
Yeah, we can certainly, I mean, I might not be able to answer them off on the fly, but we can certainly take questions as we go.
So it's between the Mass Transit District and MTD. So the city was not involved in this conversation. This is an action that's outside of the realm of the city itself and city staff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In other words, they're interested in the property and they're starting to move on to consider how it might be useful to them.
Yes, MTD and FTA initiated the process in partnership.
Thank you.
Then in May 2024, so spring to summer of 2024, through the NEPA process, so it was because of the NEPA process that the Section 106 consultation process was initiated. I believe Section 106 would have been necessary regardless of NEPA or not, but in this particular instance, the NEPA process was the macro sort of federal process that was being, that allowed or initiated that initial Section 106 consultation. So there you'll see in the notes that FTA initiates that Section 106 with SHPO and requests comments on the area of potential effect. Then, as part of this process, of course, FTA then sends out invitations to the consulting parties for acceptance. These parties included tribal representatives, the Preservation and Conservation Association, also known as PACA, the Historic Preservation Commission and the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, Mayor Marlin, and the Champaign County History Museum. Once those, continuing this process, the initiation of the process, MTD conducts phase 1 survey evaluation of eligibility under those National Register of Historic Places criteria and an initial assessment of effects.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I'm a little confused. Partly, it seems to me that the participation of the Historic Preservation Commission itself isn't recorded here at this time. And I don't think anybody understood that Mayor Marlin was the chair, because I thought that Alice Novak was the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission.
So, yeah, Mayor Marlin was not the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. So if that's misleading, I apologize.
Super misleading.
This is a list of parties who were invited, consulting parties, to include Mayor Marlin, representing herself as the mayor.
Fine.
Then also the Historic Preservation Commission, which would be represented by the Secretary of the Historic Preservation Commission, and also the Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, which I believe at the time was Alice Novak.
Well,
Maybe my commas perhaps are misplaced. But.
I'm just sort of wondering how the commission itself was not involved. I mean,
So the commission would be represented by the Secretary of the Commission and the Chair of the Commission.
so it never came before this body, sitting here in front of us. No.
I was not here at the time. We would need to look back at minutes to confirm that. But I trust your judgment if you were here as a commissioner.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody experienced this.
But I did not review the minutes.
Not to my recollection, but my mother died on May 10th, 2024. I was not in town for a bit there,
You were not
so
there,
I
yeah.
missed a meeting there. So, but not
But-
to my knowledge.
To be clear, this is meant to indicate that invitations were sent to those various individuals who represent consulting parties. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then in November of 2024, now the process, of course, has kicked off and is continuing. And so MTD employs a consultant to complete an architectural survey of the area of potential effect. The consultant recommended that the Urbana Civic Center was not National Register of Historic Places eligible, and that the project would have no adverse effects on the building.
So I have a question here.
Yes.
Who is the consultant that was hired?
My understanding is that it's HDR, but I would request that we confirm that with our MTD representative later in the evening, but I believe it's HDR.
And a second question, which is, the building is owned by the city of Urbana at the time?
Yes, the city of Urbana owns the property and owns it till today.
But the city did not employ the consultant?
The city did not employ the consultant, that's correct.
Okay.
Huh.
Please, yeah.
Because as I read it, and I wondered, did I misread it? But I thought that the SHPO said that it was eligible to be listed.
That's correct, but that's later. I mean, that's
Oh,
there's the HDR
that's later.
assessment, and then there's a contradiction.
Thank
with
you.
The SHPO.
So then in January of 2025, so after the consultant has obviously had time to work on things, FTA submitted a cultural resource investigation report for the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Downtown Urbana Transfer Center project that included an eligibility and effects determination Section 106 consultation package. The report found no adverse effects to the Urbana Civic Center. So but then the State Historic Preservation Officer, SHPO, did not concur with that determination in FTA's initial eligibility and effects determination submittal. SHPO determined that the Urbana Civic Center is in fact National Register of Historic Places eligible under Criterion A, which is recreation and locus of community events and culture, and Criterion C, which is for structurally expressive modernist design. And the adverse effects would be incurred by the project. So that's where the initial findings deviate from the SHPO findings. Yeah. Then in February of 2025, so continuing in the new year, the City of Urbana issued a letter in agreement with FTA's initial determination that the project would result in no adverse effects, essentially rebutting the SHPO determination and agreeing again with FTA's initial findings.
So there's a question here or comment.
Okay.
So who from the city made the determination that there were no adverse effects on the building without any consultation with the Historic Preservation Commission, which certainly is the body that has expertise in this area?
The letter was issued by city staff upon direction by leadership.
Can we have a copy of that letter to help us understand the process?
Yes, we certainly can provide that.
I think that would be important,
Yes.
because that's certainly the point at which the Historic Preservation Commission was bypassed.
We can certainly provide that, and I believe actually that when the letter was sent, my understanding is that the parties copied on the letter were, of course, our principal planner, the city administrator, the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission at the time, I believe was Angela Urban. I could be mistaken. It might be Alice Novak. And then also the mayor herself. So, but the letter was coming from, with direction from leadership at the time. But we'll certainly provide that. Any other questions? Okay. In April of 2025, a draft of the City of Urbana's capital improvement plan for FY26 to FY30 is introduced to the Committee of the Whole, which is our council. The Adult Education Center, which is at 211 North Ray Street, and the Urbana Civic Center, which is at 108 East Water Street, are selected for demolition of existing buildings and site improvements. Environmental site assessment and remediation as needed. Adjustments or relocation of utilities as needed. Those are direct quotes, and you can reference them in the attached CIP documents. In May of 2025, Mayor Williams is appointed mayor of Urbana, the 51st mayor of Urbana, on May 3rd. The final version of the City of Urbana's capital improvement plan is approved by council on May 27th, and the properties selected for demolition remain in the plan. So I think that's important to note there. Then in June of 2025, FTA submitted a revised eligibility and effects determination letter and materials to SHPO and all consulting parties. This letter reflected SHPO's determination that the Urbana Civic Center was National Register of Historic Places eligible and that its potential demolition would constitute an adverse effect under Section 106. The next step in the process is the production of a memorandum of agreement. And then in July, so soon after, in 2025, the staff person serving as the chair of the Historic Preservation, as the secretary of the Historic Preservation Commission separates from the City of Urbana. And then shortly after, the Department of Community Development Service director is appointed. So that is me. So Marcus left in early July, and I was appointed shortly after. Also in July, FDA hosted the first meeting with the consulting parties to provide an opportunity to discuss an overview of the project, the surveyed properties, the effects determination, potential treatment and mitigation measures, and a memorandum of agreement. Consulting parties were invited. Also in July.
So we have one more, sorry,
Oh,
one more
yep.
comment.
I do have a question about that. I don't recall there being any invitation to the Historic Preservation Commission as a consulting party to this meeting.
So we can confirm that. I believe all consulting parties who were initially identified were invited. I don't know that everyone, I don't think that everyone participated. But invitations.
Certainly we didn't participate,
Yeah.
but I'm unaware of an invitation to participate. And if that's an issue that the chair was invited to participate and was intended to send that on to others, and maybe something happened there, or maybe we need to address how the Historic Preservation Commission is invited to participate in meetings as a consulting party to ensure that someone is there to participate. Because the goal should be that someone is there.
Absolutely. I can confirm who the consulting parties or which consulting parties were invited to that meeting. I will just mention, and I'm deviating from what's in front of you, but I do want to mention that with the separation of our HPC secretary, there was a drop-off in communication. The timing of this, I think, is pertinent, and I just don't want that to get lost, is that we did have significant turnover at that time.
I also want to add there a note, and just thinking about transitions, there was a transition of leadership for the commission. I'm not sure exactly, I can't remember when that happened. And there was also the conundrum of email transition, right? Because the city uses a certain email platform that then gets forwarded. You set it up to forward, but then it didn't necessarily get forwarded, right? So sometimes when people don't get an email on the commission, it's because there was a kind of blackout period. If you didn't get the email, see the email about transitioning to a new platform, then you didn't know that you weren't getting emails, right? So there was a kind of lapse in there for some people that was of different lengths. So it may be that that's also a factor. So we do need a more,
Robust.
That's another, more robust. Thank you. That's a more robust form of communicate. Yeah.
I would also add that this was a period in which the city was routinely canceling HBC meetings
That's the other thing. Thank you. Yeah.
intentionally, and was trying to initiate a policy to only hold an HBC meeting if there was like a landmark nomination submitted.
I've been waiting to say that, and I know that we talked about it last time, and it was right around this time that people were saying, it is the interest of the commission to be more active in affairs. So, but that was with Marcus. Marcus was very aware of that and happy about that. So, but yeah, for the record.
Okay.
And also, could I add that if there was important communication being represented, that the HPC was being represented in, it certainly should be reported back to the commission so that the commission is aware of how it's being represented to the public. How can we know what we're supposed to be saying about issues when we haven't had a conversation about it and we didn't know that the conversation occurred? So this is like a really not happy moment here.
Absolutely understood, and I'm happy to keep working through this document, and then I think just as which is of course focused on this particular situation, but I do know that in our previous meeting it was discussed to have potentially another study session which focuses on ensuring that we have sort of watertight procedures in place to allow for a future Section 106 process to happen appropriately or without any kind of miscommunication. So I do think that's warranted, and if the commissioners would like to continue in a separate or more specific study session on that, it's certainly something we'd be open to helping with.
And just before you jump in, I'm confident I speak on behalf of everyone of the commission in expressing our confidence and gratitude to you for your diligence in that, recognizing that at the last meeting on February 4th, you brought to us the memorandum of understanding that called for a signature that you didn't sign. So like that's the kind of attention that we really, really appreciate here, making sure things are on everyone's radar. So
Thank you.
for
Yes.
that.
No, I appreciate it as well. All right, so just to continue with the transition of leadership, our new city administrator is appointed on July 28th, but his duties don't begin until August 4th. Then in August of 2025, the Preservation and Conservation Association, i.e. PACA, representatives submitted comments to SHPO regarding the project. And at the August meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, the commission acknowledged receipt of a letter from PACA regarding the project and the Section 106 process. And then further discussion was then deferred. At this time, the principal planner, who was our sole planner with the city at that time, is now serving as the HPC secretary. You may recall Kevin Garcia in some of your meetings. Then in September of 2025, FTA hosted the second meeting with consulting parties to provide an opportunity to address questions raised by consulting parties, review and confirm the selection and treatment of mitigation measures, and discuss next steps. The same consulting parties were invited. The draft MOA between FTA, SHPO, and MTD was drafted and distributed for review, and comments were due back 2 weeks later.
So I would ask the same question again about how invitations were extended to HBC to attend this meeting.
Okay. And also to note, the September HBC meeting was canceled. No cases and lack of staff. October 2025, the staff person serving as the principal planner and interim HPC secretary separates from the city of Urbana. The October HBC meeting is canceled. In November of 2025, Urbana HBC meeting is also canceled. There were no active cases. The city had no staff in the planning division. I just want to add, this is not a tiny violin moment, but at this point, I, as the director of community development, was the only planner in the city. And yes, so I was serving as the secretary at that time for all boards and commissions under our purview. In December of 2025 and January 2026, the MOA between FTA, SHPO, and MTD was signed, requiring MTD to follow prescribed measures to mitigate adverse effects. The MOA was transmitted to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, completing the Section 106 process. Per the MOA, MTD is required to contract a qualified professional to carry out the mitigation measures of recording the Urbana Civic Center under HIBS Level 3, which is Historic Illinois Building Survey and Documentation, which is specifically mentioned on page 4 of your MOA, which is provided in your handouts. Concurring parties were included on the transmission of the MOA and included PACA, Mayor Deshaun Williams, myself as Secretary of the City of Urbana Historic Preservation Commission. And now we're contemporary kind of timeline, January and February of this year. MTD begins preparing an application for federal funding through the U.S. DOT Build Grant Program for the Downtown Multimodal Center. That grant is up to $25 million if awarded, and Mayor Williams provided a letter of support for MTD's submission to that grant program.
Can I add one thing to the timeline? That the February 4th, 2026 meeting is when staff brings the MOA to the HPC for the first time after it's finished.
Okay, noted. Now we're anticipating completion of the NEPA process in the spring. April is the tentative date for that. And then in May or June of 2026, the work of carrying out the mitigation measure required by the MOA is estimated to be completed by the consultant contracted with MTD, and work is currently underway on that. The recordation must be completed and accepted by SHPO and the HIBS program coordinator prior to any potential demolition, if that's the direction that we go. So that concludes the handout. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
I have a question then. So This is being presented to the Historical Preservation Commission. By all accounts, this agreement is a done deal and signed, and there's actually this mitigation, and you didn't mention specifically, but the mitigation is that go ahead and tear down the building, we don't care about it, but just so that there's a historic record, just make sure that you've done a research of it and you've got pictures of it, and its history will be digitally filed in the archives of the Champaign County Historic Preservation archives up at the second floor of the library, and the cat's out of the bag, and the cat's like down the street 45 blocks away. We're just learning about it, and this is a study session. Are we studying how the thing didn't work for us, or are we studying something about what steps might we take to voice the concern of the current Historic Preservation Commission? What is our role today now? I'm wondering.
Well, commissioners are welcome to discuss whatever they choose. However, the point of today's study session was to provide an overview of the process specific to the Civic Center to date, and then with the potential to continue the conversation either in a continuation of the study session specific to how to improve the Section 106 process, or to hold a secondary related study session on that topic. The intention of tonight was also to just discuss work that has been done to date, which would include, although it's not part of this process, I think the exciting work that was done by the UIUC students. Yeah, and I think maybe as far as I'm concerned as a staff person supporting this process, perhaps identifying some questions that the board might have that would help formulate our thinking on this. But certainly we are where we are in the process.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. There's no altering that.
So I'm going to ask maybe the chair, are we going to be able to make any commentary on this? Is this study session also going to be discussion among ourselves, or what's the aspect of that? We've had the presentation, and the next thing that's going to happen is a presentation by the Professor Altschuler. Do we want to have, I've got comments I would like to make, but I don't know when to do them.
That's a good point, because we want to absorb everything in order to have like the best perspective. There's a lot to be said. I mean, I have comments about the process and also about the importance of building a kind of dialogue among groups within the city. The News Gazette article, the statements about historic preservation in there by people from the MTD are kind of obscene, to be frank. There's a resentment about, oh, wow, what's, snaggle. It could have been worse, right? We might have to not, we might not be allowed to do what we want to do and just tear it down.
We had to do this.
But there's a kind of cultural problem here that we have an opportunity to have a discussion and at the very least to make that heard. But in terms of when to do that,
So I reviewed the bylaws and the zoning ordinance and found no direction on how to conduct a study session. I would, in the interest of time and public participation, would recommend that we move on to the second portion of the presentation and then welcome commissioner discussion at the end of that. But that is not meant to deter discussion. I just want to be mindful of everybody who's here tonight. And then we can always continue the conversation to the next meeting, which is scheduled for March 4th. And we are also there are several actions or powers and duties as outlined in the zoning ordinance that the Historic Preservation Commission is able to take should they choose to move in that direction. For example, testimony to council is something that is outlined there, and you can refer to your zoning ordinance, or I can provide that section. But I think maybe just in the interest of time, we move on to the second presentation.
Yes, I mean, that's right. We've had an opportunity to ask questions about the specifics that you just walked us through, And so I would really like to invite Joseph to come forward right now for his presentation to give everyone in the room the richness of this perspective. And Ashley, you're here, and it's just funny. You're not on the agenda to speak, but I mean.
No, so Ashley is here to participate in Joseph's presentation.
Right, there you are,
Sort of
okay.
happy kind of accident in availability, and was participated. MTD participated with UIUC through this process very collaboratively, and actually so did the city of Urbana. We made the building available for tour for the students, and Joseph will touch on that. But just highlighting the partnership between the different entities and the cool work that was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have that now. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Historic Preservation Commission. Thank you to Olivia and her staff for the staff report, and thank you to the members of the Historic Preservation Commission for your time and attention. I know many of you, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Joseph Altschuler. I'm a resident of Urbana, parent of kids in Urbana Public Schools, and assistant professor at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I teach in the School of Architecture and in the Department of Landscape Architecture. And it is my mission as an educator to create studio curriculum and studio experiences that are in partnership with civic agencies and community partners, and to make sort of reciprocal learning and sort of mutual relationship building a sort of central component of a design education. And so the work I'm going to share with you tonight is one example of that. And this was academic work that was completed by students in fall 2025 at the university. And this work was done in partnership with both the city of Urbana and the MTD. And I want to just quickly acknowledge the people from those entities that elected to participate and to greatly enrich the students' experience. So from the city of Urbana, Olivia Jovine, Carmen Franks from Public Works, Vivian Krishnan, the former Arts and Culture Division Manager, and later on, many thanks to Amy Rusai, who's here tonight, who also participated from the planning department. And from the MTD, I want to thank enthusiastically Carl Natt, the CEO of the MTD, Ashley McLaughlin, who's here tonight, Jay Rank, and Amy Snyder, all of whom really generously offered their time and expertise to my students, and who connected and engaged with the students at 3 different milestones during the semester. A kind of initial charge at the beginning of the semester, where they offered to the students sort of some priorities to consider, aligned with their own needs as an agency. And all of those representatives participated at both a kind of 50% and 100% milestone, where they got to participate in design reviews with the students and offer candid feedback and one-on-one conversation, which students continue to tell me was extremely valuable. But we also hope this is a sort of mutual relationship, one where it's not just the students being enriched by these real-world community experiences, but one in which we hope to really earnestly expand the public imagination about what's possible in the built environment, about what we're capable of as a city and a civic agency, and about the ways we implement the Imagine Urbana plan that was ratified last year. And I think part of our role as a design program in a city like this one is to really be a partner with care, and to provide, in this case for the city, for the MTD, design research and speculation that might not be otherwise possible if it wasn't for the fact that we have these opportunities for partnership. So I want to thank everyone involved. as we imagine together an Urbana Civic Transit Center. I also want to just say, when I approached the MTD initially, I told them about my vision for the opportunity of adaptive reuse and the opportunities I thought it might bring to the MTD. And we were very candid with each other at the time. The MTD was clear that adaptive reuse was not the primary, was not how they were imagining the project. No one, you never say never, but it was they were clear that that wasn't their goal, and I was clear that I understood that and that I would not make any sort of false expectations to the students that possibility was likely, and in fact, beyond adaptive reuse as a sort of opportunity and as a design prompt to the students, beyond adaptive reuse, one of our primary goals was to think together with the MTD and the city about how a transit center can be more than a transit center, how a transit center can offer civic amenity and public use that go well beyond what we typically expect as sort of the, let's say, conventional and extremely important requirements of a bus station. And something that I think that we can really be more creative with thinking about not only program that might be paired with a bus station, but also the ways in which a bus station in a prominent location like downtown Urbana can also activate the public realm around it. I know you're all, as members of the Historic Preservation Commission, probably familiar with many of these photos from the Champaign County History Archive, but I can't help but not show them again because of I just think how striking they are. This is the building under construction in 1968. And the interiors immediately before it opened. And it was, as was already stated by public comment, of course, this building was just phase one of a broader plan, or was intended to be phase one of a broader plan. Really just the foyer or the lobby, a sitting room, if you will, of a much larger complex, which, when I brought this to the MTD and to the city, it seems like such a great fit for a bus station, because what does a bus station need? Certainly space to sit in a lobby, which is what the building was always intended. This is the dedication of the building in 1970, and my imagined rededication, May 3rd, 2028. Oops, wrong way. And I think it also should be said, before I get into the students' work specifically, about the building's role. It's already been said by public comment that it's been used in such a variety of community ways, both public and private, communal and civic, recreation and arts, but also specifically as a platform for our cities, for engagement in the city, as a place where ideas about the city's future have been cultivated and stewarded. And that was, for instance, even a site for engagement for the creation of the city's 2012 Downtown Urbana Plan. All right, I'll breeze through some of these drawings from the master plan so we can get into the students' work. So here's the student, we'll get into the students' work, and again, I really was, my goal was to challenge them to think, of course, about a building, but to think beyond buildings, to think about a building in this case that I think has such an important role to play because of the sort of disconnect in the urban fabric in the northeast corner of downtown that it's emblematic of. It's sort of it's a corner that there's been lots of thought and lots of love behind in different plans, but like desperately needs some intent beyond just the design of a building there, but how it actually connects to the broader public realm of downtown Urbana. I also need to express deep gratitude to Troy Richmond, who's the City of Urbana's public facilities manager, who generously welcomed 90 students into the building in September of 2025 for a tour, which is, I think, the biggest number of people that have been in the building since 2018. And the students were totally in awe of the dazzling interior. And they heard sort of firsthand from Troy about the building, its challenges, its stewardship, its maintenance, and its possibilities. And it should also not be understated, of course, as many of us know, that immediately to the east of the building is a generous parking lot that you see on the right here that provides quite a bit of square footage for potential new construction. So it was with these guiding principles around access and mobility, community amenity, adaptive reuse, organizational logic, public realm, and civic identity that the students began to speculate. First, by kind of looking deeply into the urban fabric of downtown and the sort of existing landmarks, of which this Urbana Civic Center is one. And I think one of the primary sort of takeaways from the students, and this is a slightly playful drawing to show this, but there's a sort of cast of characters of Urbana landmarks that many of which have been either adaptively reused or added onto over the years to remain relevant, to remain functional, to remain safe, to remain accessible, and to remain a sort of continued piece of a sense of place that is distinct and unique to downtown Urbana. Certainly, we have some recent success stories, despite their challenges, such as the Hotel Royer, and certainly years before, buildings like the courthouse, the Urbana Free Library, and much more recently, the Bennett Administration Center. I would argue that one of the things that makes downtown Urbana distinct, and quite different from downtown Champaign, may I add, is its leadership, innovation, and sort of continued demonstration of how adaptive reuse and strategic additions to older buildings can create a sense of place, can create a sense of continued history and future, and a sense of civic identity. And so it's with these observations and this sort of quilt of civic characters that make up downtown Urbana that we sought to insert the Civic Center into the conversation. So to conclude, I want to offer just sort of 5, let's say, buckets of ideas and strategies that the students came up with. I'm not going to show any one project in depth, but offer sort of an impressionistic sampling of some student projects, and particularly ones that the MTD and the City of Urbana expressed the most enthusiasm about in our sort of midterm and final reviews, as examples of ways we could, again, imagine Urbana Civic Transit Center that begins to address the MTD's extremely important goals. And I'm absolutely, exhilarated by the possibility of a new transit center, a new bus transfer station in downtown Urbana, and imagining how the existing Civic Center is not an obstacle in that goal, but actually something to add great value and assets to that future. So the first strategy, addition, is maybe the simplest, most straightforward, and frankly the most practical, which is to say that a new building could be constructed immediately to the east in the city-owned parking lot. I believe it's parking lot 09, and that the existing Civic Center could be rehabbed and either left disconnected as a sort of a companion building with maybe a plaza in the middle, or connected in a sort of robust way. This is maybe a more adventurous, a more intensive sort of intervention, but a sort of two buildings side by side, old and new, with a connection in between. Now, I wanted to encourage to the students that there's many ways of thinking about adaptive reuse and creative injection of civic identity into a bus station, and addition is just one way. Some students explored subtraction, the sort of careful and strategic actually removal of parts of the existing building to create new points of access and function to the existing building. In this case, a proposal to remove a quarter of the building to create a sort of new access and a new floor underneath. Of course, many of these ideas are, some of them are less practical than others. Some of them involve quite a bit of imagination. But I strongly believe that is these kinds of imaginations that we can strive to do hard things in the city, and again, add value to all in the process. Some students explored like how the existing building's sort of core skeletal structure might be retained, but walls or other envelope might be opened up for other kinds of public use that would be appropriate for a bus station, where sort of open air covered areas are an asset. Some students were very strategic with how, again, the existing structure could remain in place. The structure which I think both the SHPO officer and like many of our students would agree is one of the sort of emblematic and significant aspect of its architecture, but could be rearranged relative to the building envelope, relative to sort of functional needs that the MTD might have around service, around food, around waiting in sort of exciting new ways. Probably the most fantastical of all, but again, we can do hard things, is the idea of even raising the roof or retaining the roof and reconfiguring it. A very fantastical proposal that sort of imagined this really kind of taking the infrastructural impetus to the next level, imagining this sort of elevated track, recreational track, that the Civic Center would become a kind of nucleus around its orbit. And that would also double as a sort of canopy to protect folks waiting for the bus from the rain and snow around the perimeter of the property. And then finally, I was very impressed by the students' attention to the program itself and how it might, again, go beyond a building, go beyond a bus station, and activate the public realm. And that public transit, which I think is one of the most public acts and sort of spaces of all, a place where you're most likely to encounter someone who's different from you, could be nurtured at this spot with other kinds of supportive programs, with other kinds of sort of co-productive amenities. One that garnered some enthusiasm also from Ashley, if I may say so, was this project that proposed thinking about a bus station as also a artistic hub for creating bus wraps by local artists and sort of making buses through both projection and wraps, vehicles, literally vehicles of culture that would broadcast the work of local artists throughout the city from this hub at the Urbana Civic Transit Center. So I will stop there. Again, with it's really been one of the most incredible joys of my academic career to partner with people like Ashley, to partner with folks like Olivia at the MTD and the city of Urbana, to think about big ideas and to think about how we can steer creative futures that benefit the greatest variety and the biggest swaths of our community.
Thank you very much. I'm going to admit that I don't know what happy accident quite means. Are you not presenting something then? Because you weren't on the agenda? I need a
Correct.
little clarification there.
I don't have anything to present. I'm here just to answer your questions. We can go back to anything from the timeline that you want to revisit, but also questions related to Joseph's work and our participation in it. So I'm here on behalf of MTD to answer absolutely any questions about the process. I didn't present anything because we have no plans to present. We're just in the NEPA review, and so Olivia did a great job of summarizing that process. But as you know, we don't own the property, we don't have plans for the site itself, and so in that regard, I didn't have anything specific to present.
I apologize. I should not have, I'm thinking on my feet here. It's not a happy accident at all. Ashley's been pivotal in this process and obviously shared a lot of information with Joseph specifically to tee up this course. And so in that sense, it's great that you're here to participate. And also MTD provided very helpful content in the production of the handout that was shared earlier.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
for this clarification. I just
sorry.
want to be sure because you're also an employee of MTD, and so it's also there's something feels a little odd in that regard. But just to be clear that we got that all out in the open. Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the commissioners? And let's first ask questions about the presentation. Then we can settle into a larger discussion that might involve you, Olivia, if we want to be synthetic on all fronts.
Well, I would like to say to Joseph that, okay, this is really interesting to watch and to see the productions of your students. Of course, creativity coming in to make a solution is like the most valuable aspect of thinking. Opening the door, opening the roof, opening new uses, bringing new features into a building that it's very interesting and has a lot of options for expansion or reuse or redevelopment in various ways. So I really think that that the public, if it understood the creative use of this building through understanding what your charrette project was, that the public would maybe become very involved in the future of this building, because it would meet so many community needs. It would become something that would be a center focus for the community, because we don't have a public square. We don't have like a plaza in this community that works. And we've had this long hunt for the space. Diane Marlin, when the first thing she did was she went to Indianapolis and she worked with public designers and to create What's in Your Square. And so, all right, so we got the What's in the Square plan. We forgot to invite the owner of the building to be a participant in that process. But even the ideas that came from it, not a single one has been acted upon. And this city is so famous for drawing plans and then acting on them and almost nothing. They don't, they would just, let's accomplish one thing, I think would have been a great mantra for the city. So I would love to see all of your students' work. And I'm wondering if, you probably had a charrette at the architectural department and that's all history. But if that charrette had been held, and I think at one point you mentioned to me privately that you sure would like to do a kind of a charrette within the building itself, I think I would love to see you do that, because I want to know, I would like to study some of the images that you flick through very quickly, and you didn't represent everybody that was working in your class. But I think it would so much inform us about the future potential for the use of this property. Whether we kept part of it, some of it, we kept all of it. But if it's a demolition, it's a done deal that there's a lost opportunity. And it seems like structurally it's sound. And, there has been a bad rap, mostly from administration in the past, about, it costs a lot of money to fix the roof. But, you got to fix the roof. This building here had problems, and you had to go fix the roof in this building so that you wouldn't have leaks downstairs and whatever. So if you're a community that supports the buildings which you are responsible for, you do the maintenance. You require landlords to do maintenance on their properties, but then you don't do maintenance on your own. And then the other thing I want to say is, there was a complaint about the kitchen's old-fashioned. Well, big deal. Remodel the kitchen. Put some new equipment in there. Make it make it look good. So I don't like the idea that the city is so happy to throw the building under the bus, because this building could be reimagined and saved, and there's room around it for MTD to create a unique space. And the students' imaginations, they're not even like professional architects, but they come up with these great ideas. Everybody doesn't have to be one of the things about the SHPA, all of the state requirements and all that is, to even comment and to be listened to, you have to have all this training, and you have to have 5 years of experience, and you have to show all this expertise, and you have to know how to write up a plan, draft a plan that has about 7 pages of instructions on how to write a plan up. It's all brain work, but there's no creativity in this process. So, so thank you very much. And I really appreciate the MTD for being interested in this property. Yes, we have a lot of empty spaces downtown, and I would love to see a really nice looking bus station there. Would I say, well, in my mind, it should have been the sheriff's new building, because that's a big hunk of something that hasn't gone anywhere. But this is more creative, and I would accept it, and put some amenities into it. So, I wonder if MTD could if they're getting a huge grant to build a building, Why don't they use a quarter of the grant to fix the roof? Yeah, put a new kitchen in there. Make that part of the grant. Say, hey, we're going to do adaptive reuse, and this is going to be great, and look at this plan, and you probably get your grant. But if you want to say, we're going to tear this down and build a 3-story box with, a bus here, a bus there, it's going to be mundane. It's not, you haven't picked a designer yet, but don't just build a box for us. You start with something great like this, and wow us with your proposal so that we can be excited about what you want to do in our downtown.
Thank you, Dennis. Kate, yes.
Joseph, thank you for sharing students' work. I know they had a really good time and they learned something about the city they live in that they don't often learn, and it was a great experience for them. While this particular image is on the screen, I also want to point out that I know in the conversations, because I was a part of this jury as well, with some folks from MTD, and there was a lot of kind of commentary about how there's just not really room on this site to keep the existing building and to add bus infrastructure. But I think that this image in particular suggests there really are some other strategies to consider, and they should be taken seriously. So thank you for sharing the work and the creative process. I also think it's really good evidence that inviting people into a conversation about a property can actually be really fun. And so you don't have to shut out the public when you're doing initial planning for a transportation project. Actually inviting people in can result in some really wonderful conversations, a lot of really good ideas at the beginning, instead of when you've reached the end and made a decision about demolition and what mitigation is. And then you have room for kind of fun conversation because a decision has already been made. I would really encourage every planning process to invite as many people in as possible, because everybody likes to participate, and also because the Imagine Urbana plan celebrates the idea of public participation in civic decisions as a kind of public goal and priority. And because the Imagine Urbana plan talks a lot about sustainability, the green goals of the city, and the greenest building we have is the one that already exists, and we know that, and that demolition and construction are the biggest contributors to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So while this Section 106 review process is extremely frustrating, and I do have a couple more comments about the timeline that I will wait for a moment because I know other folks have some things to say. I do think that this presentation is evidence of the vibrancy of open conversation about decision making, and it would be great to have more of it. So thanks.
Andrew, did you want to jump in with anything?
Thank you, Professor. It was good to see the review, and thank you very much. I don't have any other comments to add than from what has been said already. Thanks.
I guess I would just add thank you. It's seeing the photos of people in the building is a reminder. I haven't been in the building since the lockout. I call it the lockout. And it was it is really beautiful. You just see it in a couple of photographs, and what a shame to not recognize that. So the things that I'm sitting with are, I just want to put them on the table, are kind of larger questions for everybody, and I would put the mayor into this as well. We do have Imagine Urbana, which calls for welcoming spaces. It calls for unique places, recognition of different forms of identity. It's really interesting how that's in there. And so I think that this has been historically a place that did that. And I like to think that it still will. So I'm going to go in the optimistic track and say, I think that it still will. But I feel like in order to do that, I recognized for the first time about 35 years ago that in the Midwest, where I'm not a native of the Midwest, but the idea of destruction as a form of progress is alive and well, and one way in which individuals and communities show that they're doing well is that they willfully destroy things that don't need to be destroyed. And sometimes it takes on kind of curious dimensions. As some of you know, like I was very active in trying to save the Burnham Mansion. The destruction of the Burnham Mansion, to be clear, where there weren't structural issues, the destruction of the Burnham Mansion didn't need to happen. There were personal reasons why it happened, which is an interesting story. But the fact of the matter also is that it actually cost the taxpayers of Champaign hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars because they had to pay for a resource to be demolished when the plan for it was going to be purchased and moved 1 block onto West Side Park into a site that was already open and available. And they made an agreement with the SHPO to do that, and then they destroyed it anyhow, right? So it took me a while to unpack, why did that just happen? Why would the people of the city lost an amenity? It's so easy to imagine that on West Side Park joining a suite of incredible houses, and instead they put in a parking lot for, I think it was 32 cars. So I would like to think of this as an opportunity to make some assertions, to write some letters, to have a meeting with the mayor that just points out, I think in the Midwest region, there's a tendency to think of these situations as like the wheels are in motion, the jaw is locked, it can't be released. And then I hear things like, well, we don't, it's not our site, right? It's sort of like it's wide open, and the money isn't even there. So it's like there are people who can say, stop, right? There are people who can look at these and say, wow, great idea, we didn't think that. There's no more obvious, there's no better site for a mass transit anything building than a parking lot, especially if it's a heavily used parking lot, because that's the point of mass transit, right? It obviates that. So I would love to hear, the detail. I wasn't in the review. I didn't hear the details about why that wouldn't be sufficient space. It sounds like there's so many plans for it to be so much more than just a place for people to wait for a bus that it's hard for me to understand how there isn't sufficient space there. If it can be accommodated by an outhouse or a porta potty, they call it, in a parking lot right now, and it's just anything bigger than that's better. So to fit something to that site seems really logical. And the last thing I want to say, which Dennis has already said, is that to a certain degree it's obscene to imagine that this building couldn't be saved because there's a threshold cost, when there's an appeal then for tens of millions of dollars that could incorporate that. And the point is really, really well taken. And there's a phenomenal example of that from landscape architecture, where a landscape architect in a community in Switzerland recognized that they were going to renovate something by destroying it. And he said, well, but if you add 10% into this budget, you can actually preserve the things that are up there and make this amenity that'll make it more interesting and a better icon for your own business, right? For your own thing. And they said, yeah, that's a good point. And so they actually upped the ante for their bid. So I want to do what I can in the time that remains to me in the Midwest, just to try to break. I mean, I plan to stay here. I'm not saying I'm moving away, but just to kind of get people out of this mindset that if you're a successful farmer, the way that you show you're a successful farmer is you take your 100-year-old beautiful home and you set fire to it, you push it into the foundations, and you build right next to it a piece of crap. And everyone's like, hooray, like, because we've got money to waste. We don't have money to waste. That's the point. So I see a lot of that in this situation. And I don't like the idea that we're locked into demolition here. And the last thing I will say, and I speak from some experience here because I'm on the Chancellor's Design Advisory Committee on campus, which when I was asked to be on that, was told, as a landscape person, I was told this is not about rubber stamping. I said, because I'm not doing it if it's rubber stamping. And the first thing we were asked to do was to rubber stamp a building. The first time we were seeing it, that was the chancellor was going to sign off on the following week. So we wrote a letter that we sent to the chancellor's assistant that the chancellor then read, and they shut down the project. And everyone was like, what? That never happens. They didn't have the money all assembled, but also it was a really bad idea. And it took somebody just, saying, hey, wait a minute here. And now they've completely transformed the process. So the Chancellor's Design Advisory Committee is the first thing that vets. And we come in again, and they're now giving us voting authority in this, which is incredible. So it's not just talking. So I would really like to springboard this somehow. I'm just putting this to my colleagues into an opportunity to communicate our frustrations and at the lack of recognition of what the student work seems to really clearly show, which is opportunity, and to try to correlate with that, with some of the logics that have to do with cost effectiveness. Because the path that's on actually is, I would argue, guaranteed to be more expensive than the path of preserving this building. And I think that's probably pretty easy to show. That's my spiel.
I think I'll ask that Joseph rejoin the audience, and then the commissioners can have discussion amongst themselves, and Ashley and I will be available for questions as they arise.
Could I respond to a few questions and assumptions that we're working on here? First of all, just to give a little bit more context that wasn't in the timeline. So we don't have a plan for the site. This is a process. MTD has been working with the city for over 10 years to find a site for a more official bus transfer station in downtown. So we've worked through multiple administrations and multiple sites, and we've landed on this site recently with the previous administration. While it was not their process and they did not hire the consultant because it's not their responsibility to do the NEPA process, we did that at their direction. We worked closely with them on that. We would not have invested in the NEPA process on that property without that explicit collaboration with them and other agencies. So as a transit agency using federal transit funding, doing a NEPA review is a requirement before we even consider buying a piece of property. So that's a risk for us, and it's a big investment for us. And some of the quotes you heard in the newspaper were in response to that expense that we have to pay, and that extends. And that's public money, and we take that very seriously. And so that's difficult for us. It's difficult for our board to digest. It's a big commitment for us, and we don't take it lightly. So some of those comments, which may have sounded like they're about the NEPA process, were more about the cost and time and resources it takes to get through the process to even know if we can buy the property and move forward with the project. So that's a larger issue with MTD in the history of other developments and other complications with developments. It's not even specific just to this site or this NEPA process. I will also note that as the structure currently sits on the site, we do not believe we can utilize it for transit purposes. So there could be iterations, but as it currently sits and its footprint, at least part of it would have to be demolished to have 40 and 60-foot vehicles circulating on the site. So if that is not a direction that the city is willing to consider at this stage, we would not move forward with a grant application or any further investigations. But that is what we require in order to utilize the site for this purpose. So you mentioned additional purposes other than transit. And the original idea, working with the city and other local agencies, was that we would utilize the site not only for transit, but also for other government entities that we think would be a good fit for the downtown area. We've been in talks with several of them, but as this process has stretched on, it's very difficult for anyone to commit because we don't have a timeline. We don't have any design work. Again, we're just kind of in this study period with the NEPA process. So the larger vision is to have like a government, a multi-agency use site that is more accessible to downtown and to the public and to transit facilities. That would maximize the property. We want to respect the uses that have been there. And like Joseph said, adaptive reuse wasn't top of mind, but part of that is because the city has vacated it for many years and had already slotted it for demolition. And so while I understand that that feels drastic, that wasn't even our decision. Like, that is where we were starting from. And I will also say, I listened to the last study session, and I was really disappointed and surprised. We worked in good faith with the city. We followed, our consultant followed the steps that they were supposed to in reaching out to all the consulting parties. Because Marcus was operating as the secretary, and because the chair of the commission did not respond, they were not considered, were not continually invited to the events. It was whoever accepted the invitation was then, included in an ongoing manner. And so I can't speak to how Marcus did or did not communicate anything, or any of the other staff. I simply can't speak to that. But we did have, involvement of Marcus at different points. We were happy to have Phyllis join us, and that's all I can say about that. I mean, to our knowledge, you all had plenty of opportunities to participate. And the fact that no one explicitly from the commission didn't participate, again, to our knowledge, that was the commission secretary. But as the city has been abandoned, and this was not on any radar for important structures in the city, had no nominations for landmark status. There was no evidence that this was going to be an issue to us to our consultants in particular. And so I understand that's maybe not the feeling of everyone. Again, I was really surprised to hear the meeting and discouraged about the state of the conversation at this moment. So I just want to say I'm happy to answer any other questions. There's a lot of content to digest. We really enjoyed working with Joseph and his students. It was like a truly inspiring process. And I think that MTD has demonstrated a commitment to the community, not just through our service, but through our Illinois terminal construction. That's, we feel, as a, historically sensitive construction. And, we want to do something great in our city and have a great downtown transit station. Again, it does require some alteration to the building at a minimum. And because we don't have, we'll have to go through a public procurement process to get an architecture and engineering firm on payroll or whatever. We simply don't know what the opportunities are yet. And so if demolition is taken off the table, we won't proceed out of respect for whatever the city decides.
I just want to address the surprise from MTD that HPC would be disappointed about not being included in the process. I think if you have the historic preservation of a city that is supposed to be a consulting party and no one is appearing at the meetings or responding, that means that there's something wrong. And I know that MTD has certainly had to go through this process before and is aware of that. So I do think there's a missing piece there that we can certainly follow up on. I also think that the SHPO's finding that this is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places in 2 categories would certainly indicate that there would be needing some engagement from HBC. So there's plenty of evidence in the record that the engagement of the Historic Preservation Commission from the city's side would be a necessary thing.
Again, the secretary was participating, and
that's
you were
not
invited.
a personal statement about any individual. It's about the process.
Yeah.
And it is not a one-to-one me against another person. It's HBC needs to be engaged, particularly when there's a finding that the property is eligible for the National Register by the SHPO.
Yes and yes. Everyone is trying to do their best work. So it's clear that there was a lapse somewhere. I don't want to put it on one person at all, because sometimes the lapse is, everything rolls along. Dennis, I sense, has a question. I have a question, though, which is, it does relate to the news article, because I did read it a little bit differently than it's just about cost. There was this, and I want to be clear about this as a generalization. I've never known a mass transit district or any transit authority to look at a historic, potentially landmark site as an opportunity, like, oh, wow, that's great. Instead, it's always an antagonistic relationship. It's like, that thing, if we can't tear it down, it's a roadblock. And so my question to you, since you're open to what the students were doing and you contributed to that in a really terrific way, is it possible for the MTD to actually see this as an opportunity? Knowing what you know now, knowing what the students have shared, rather than saying, like the whole idea that if we couldn't get a bus to turn on the site as opposed to adjacent to the site on the roads or something, I mean, again, I haven't seen all that. I don't do what you do. But the whole idea that it's premised on that, and if you can't do that, the whole thing falls apart. Or if you can't tear down something, you can't do it. To me, that just speaks to what I was concerned about in the article before, which is where historic preservation is seen as a roadblock rather than an opportunity. And there's a way in which, when I'm saying that, I'm, again, cognizant of the sense that there's some way in which destruction is seen as a form of production. There's a community in Illinois that had in their downtown one beautiful historic building, an old store, and they wanted to put in a Dollar General store. And to the left was an empty parking lot, disused parking lot. To the right was a disused parking lot. Behind it was a disused parking lot. And people in the SHPO said, wait, this is a gem. Like, people will come to your town to see this incredible building. And that's what they wanted to tear down, and that's what they tore down. So there's something in there that, like, I love the idea that the MTD would actually seek out an opportunity to use this to support the preservation of something that on the inside is, it's a beautiful space. I think on the outside, it has this iconic profile, that they would not invest in that as a symbol of what all of the good things you're talking about when you talk about the MTD and what they care about. So my question, and you don't have to answer this right now, but I wonder to myself if the MTD, knowing what it knows now, could get out of the kind of it's one way or, you know, it's this way or nothing logic, and just say, wow, okay, let's transform our thinking here, consistent with our values, serving this community, and listening to the whole logics of transit center as a community center, right? Like a grocery is a community center. That's the studio this semester. It's fantastic. And say, wow, we could be the best MTD, you know, in this state, in this region. Look at what we did and inspire something. So I like the idea that they would be open to that. I hope that they would be open to that. And if they're not locked into something, it'd be nice to know that that's possible.
Well, I think I've said we're not locked into anything. We haven't even hired a designer yet. We have committed time to this process, which was, again, very inspirational. When I say we can't function as a circulating transit center on this site with the building where it is, there is a portion of it, particularly toward the back, where we just literally cannot park and have buses be moving. Okay. So initially, actually, one thought that we had, like, you know, long ago before H Mart moved in, there's a massive parking lot back there, so we thought maybe we would have more flexibility. That's not the case now, and that's great. H Mart is thriving, and we're all happy about that. So there just are some restrictions, restrictions that we're willing to work with. But again, we never came to this looking to destroy a historic institution. We came to an abandoned building that the city had slotted for demo. And so this is not our goal to take something down that is beloved. It has been vacated for many years. And so in addition to these opportunities, you know, that we have asked consulting parties to participate, there's several years here that anyone could have paid more attention to this structure.
I just moved here 2 years ago.
Could I?
You're off the.
May I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
First, I want to acknowledge that, one, that I completely understand how the MTD, based on, especially on reviewing some facts in this history that I wasn't fully privy to, and many that I were, the city's choices to disinvest in this building completely line up, to me, with the MTD's decision-making process. And I I want to just like I want to just voice that I understand that, and I think the MTD does big, important things. And I think my choice to create a studio in partnership with the MTD and the City of Urbana as presented tonight was an effort to counter a disinvestment from the city and a previous administration, and precisely to demonstrate in good faith for all parties involved that there's more to this story than we think there is, that there's more opportunity and assets for the MTD than maybe the city themselves had led them to believe, thanks to some of these capital improvement plans from years past. And I say this not as a criticism of the city, but as a challenge to the city. I think that the City of Urbana can do bigger things. I think that the MTD does big things, and I think the city can be inspired by that. And I think it's only through a partnership between the City of Urbana and the MTD that we can make the biggest thing happen here, and that can benefit the site. And the final thing I want to mention is, especially for the Historic Preservation Commission audience specifically, I firmly believe that there is absolutely a scenario where some careful and selective demolition of the existing building should indeed be explored as an option to reconcile some of the competing priorities around the existing building and its highest and best use as a bus station. And certainly, like, one example of that, which is visible in this slide, is this there's an annex on the back of the Civic Center.
Exactly.
That has the kitchen and the bathrooms, and that I think it doesn't, I think it's fairly intuitive to, well, I shouldn't say that, but I think one could make a strong argument about how that annex is not as significant as the core structure and the core party of the building, and that its removal, which is also demonstrated in this image on the right, that was created by a student, would be instrumental actually in changing access for buses on the site. So I think I just want to encourage us as a city, the MTD as an agency, and again, in good faith partnership, not so much to like point blame about how we got here, but to just, the NEPA process need not have been done in vain. Like, we're at a point where I think we can imagine together both preservation and selective demolition as part of a mutually beneficial scenario.
I have to say I agree very much with that that decision maker or that observation. I walked around the building this afternoon to look at it more carefully. I'd been in it before for events. The city held receptions for retiring administrators and people. I've seen weddings there. There have been community meetings there. There have been all kinds of events there. And, I noticed that the building extended out to the back, and it's just a cube. And it's probably where the refrigerator of the kitchen was and some of the storage for the kitchen's food or whatever. And it's not going to be necessarily a place that's going to have a kitchen. So, yes, chop that off. It would give you 25 more feet for a bus to pass through in the back and make the turn or whatever. Well-decided annexation. You lop it off and save the main part of the building. And I really agree that previous administrations may have looked at the city differently, but I didn't see any real vision in the things that were decided by this city. This city lost its sense of visionary imagination. And to bring it back here, I mean, I've talked to the city council for years about connecting the Boneyard pathway from the university to the downtown, and we have part of it that's built. Most of it's not built, but we did plan at least to the Main Street and Springfield Y location. But there is a mindset that, no, it's just like too much to think about. to make the connectivity, and yet it would be such a smart thing for this to do. That's just one example of lack of vision. And so there's an opportunity here, and nothing's final. And we've gone a long way. We had assumptions, but I think we can change our assumptions. And I want to encourage not only the city council, but the community at large to speak and try to bring a new solution to what could be a super duper asset to the community just by thinking creatively. So I think MTD would have a better chance to get a grant if adaptive reuse of this space, and it showed that some kind of creativity in the design work of it would be a win-win solution. I think we have a win-win solution on the boards. We're making, it's okay to turn left when you think you're going to go straight ahead off the cliff. Okay, let's turn left.
Thank you. So there's a lot of goodwill in the room here. And I really do trust that everyone, I'm speaking in a way to what Ashley, you were saying there. I firmly, and actually, Joseph, you referenced it too, I firmly believe that when people were making decisions, for the most part, they're operating in good faith using the information they have to the best of their ability at that time, right? People want the best for the community. And I extend that even back to 2018, when I remember people going to something that was scheduled at the center, and it's like, why is it locked? And it seemed to make no sense. It was like this abrupt decision. I'm not going to finger wag about that because I don't want to finger wag about anything. The question is, given who we are, given where we are, given what we've got, how can we make this into something terrific? And so my question then, because I'm also in the interest of time, which goes to Olivia, is when we think about what we can actually do, this group, you can do something, the mayor can do something, the community can do something. In terms of the things that, can you remind everyone of the options? You mentioned earlier that you would do that you would say, here are some options that you could pursue as a commission.
Certainly. I think just since we'll transition the conversation, I would invite both Joseph and Ashley to rejoin the audience, and then if very specific questions come up, they can always go to the microphone and address that. But we'll just conclude the presentation portion for the evening. Thank you both. So I'm not the exhaustive authority on next steps, but from what I initially researched, obviously we can continue the discussion here, host additional study sessions, and then specifically in the zoning ordinance in Article 12, Section 12, so under, we have powers and duties of the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Preservation Commission shall have the following powers: to inform and educate the citizens of Urbana concerning the historic and architectural heritage of the city. So you can, I think, interpret, inform, and educate however you would like to see fit. We can discuss that. And then also there is this other option, which is to testify before the City Council and all boards and commissions, including the Building Safety Code Board of Appeals. It lists all the various boards and commissions on any matter affecting historically or architecturally significant buildings, structures, sites, objects, and areas. The chair or the chair's designee shall give such testimony on behalf of the Preservation Commission. So that was one other path for action that was clearly defined in the zoning ordinance. But also I think it would be remiss if I didn't say that commissioners are also able to act as citizens and send letters and testimony and have meetings with elected officials as well. I just encourage that if the commissioners are meeting on this topic outside of the meetings that we hold here in the chambers, that we are mindful of OMA restrictions, which means that no more than, it really should be 2 by 2, but no more than 3 constitutes a violation of OMA.
Right.
So that's just something to flag there. But really, I do think that there's a somewhat broad range of actions and direction that can be taken from this point forward. And Where I can advise with the zoning ordinance or the bylaws, I'm happy to, but this is also uncharted territory for me, I will just say that. But I think page 190 specifically of the zoning ordinance may be of use here.
Kate, did you have something you?
I did have a question. I think one of the other options is certainly for someone to file a landmark nomination as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. At the local level and for the National Register of Historic Places, since it's already been deemed eligible?
Yep.
I believe so.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
There are 4 of us, not 7 of us here tonight. We're a quorum, but do we want to confer a bit to talk about what the, I mean, I would relish the opportunity to testify, or I would relish the opportunity to have a conversation. I guess as a citizen, I can do that as well with, say, the mayor. But I don't know how other people feel about Dennis.
Well, I mean, I would hope that the mayor will watch this meeting and absorb, I think, what seems to be some enthusiasm for reimagining. I would like to have more information, maybe copies of the report that SHPO evaluated, you know, how it met 2 of the requirements for national nomination. I don't know if we need to step to national nomination. I think local landmarking would be appropriate. Agreeing that it would exclude the annex, even though it's part of the building, it's not part of the unique aspect of the structure itself, so that there would be flexibility if such a landmarking were created. And I think that going before, that if it was the feeling of this commission be reported to the city council, who's the deciding body basically on everything that happens in the city, that we support the preservation of the building in a form with more creative consideration for it, so that the city would engage the MTD in reconsidering the concept that was going on, and to not decide that the building was most effective by being demolished. So, I mean, I don't know. That's just off my top of my head, but I'd like the city council to be abreast that we have a really different idea of what could be done here, and to maybe change the direction, because they have the power to reimagine themselves and make the statement legal.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on your statements, David, that I thought were really well made about the portrayal of historic preservation as something really negative, as a roadblock, as something that you just have to kind of bypass, get through in order to get to a plan that's actually really good. And I certainly have been a part of a lot of historic preservation meetings where there is this contentious, kind of argumentative aspect to things. And it's often because historic preservation is brought in at the last minute, because there has been an attempt to bypass. And so you get to this situation where those who are in favor of thinking about how to reuse a building have to really try to fight to get that perspective even brought to the table. And that's a really big issue. I think the real issue with historic preservation is that it's actually much more creative, open-ended, and inclusive. It's a big piece of economic development. If you don't have it in your toolkit as a city, you're missing out on a huge way to market your city, to make it more valuable to the people who live there, and to bring people together in a shared narrative and a shared story. And the Civic Center, as a newcomer to this town who's done a really deep dive on a lot of architecture here, like the story of the Civic Center is a really amazing one, of 3 grads from the University of Illinois Architecture School who all worked for some of the most significant architects in town. The building reflects the influence of Jack Baker, who is a kind of like the local hero who one of the architects in this firm worked for. One of the other architects was the architect of record for Paul Rudolph, working on the Christian Science Center. And the building reflects some of the lessons learned from working with Paul Rudolph. It's like a big piece of the narrative of modern architecture. Beyond that, it's also a really big piece of this community and like reading the narrative of the citizens who came together in the 60s to say, hey, we actually need a civic space for events. And they fought together in creating a committee, working through city policy, trying to deal with the budget to try to get this thing put together. And reading their narrative about why this place was important to them is kind of inspirational, right? Different people coming together, try to achieve something they perceive the community needed. And then the fact that the Civic Center really became a place where many African-American families and civic groups really could find a place to meet when private event centers wouldn't rent to them, right? So there's a piece of the story that's related to the story of Urbana as a place that has unequal opportunity, and yet the city provided that opportunity to the people who lived here. And I think that the decision to shutter the building because it needed maintenance is another part of the story of Urbana. And that maybe there's an opportunity to turn a corner and think about what does maintenance mean, what does repair mean, what does care mean, because that's what historic preservation actually is maintenance, care, repair, tending your community, reinvesting in the stories and places that make it what it is. And I would hope that historic preservation can be perceived that way, like as a piece of the solution in a city with a lot of people, with a lot of memories, a lot of attachment to places, whose voices aren't always heard when we talk about civic investments and planning. And the more open to bringing more people into the conversation about preservation and development we are, the better off we all are. And I would just hope that we can turn a corner on thinking of historic preservation as something really positive to be engaged very, very, very early when we're talking about what it means to make Urbana the place that it is.
I'd like to make one more comment, and then I'm going to make a proposal for which underscores something from that. It's very refreshing, Ashley, to hear like the MTD's openness to possibilities. And it's wonderful, Joseph, to see possibilities being put out there. What I know from the Burnham Mansion was that there were all sorts of great ideas. I mean, in the end, it was we were going to move the house. But even before then, a vocational educational center for people working in craft. I mean, just working on the house itself. Students at the high school themselves put that out there. They were profoundly disappointed. And so it was despite the fact that there were so many obvious answers there and that they didn't need the site because they could have used a different, immediately adjacent, and nevertheless it went down. So that's the thing I'm fundamentally most concerned about. And it anchors in this, what we kept hearing even when we were saying otherwise, was preservation. People thought of it as ossification. It meant it has to sit there like a big old barnacle and you can't do anything about it. And of course, preservation is never about that. It's always about, wow, how can we move this forward with some interesting new use, right? Modification isn't off the table. What do you need to preserve? What do you not? So like seeing all that. So there's a great opportunity here in this situation to work with everybody, but especially the city, our colleagues in the city, to make sure everybody gets that. So that these situations as they go forward are recognized a little bit differently. So I don't think we're going to get an answer tonight about what exactly we're going to do next. I do recognize that we have another meeting in 2 weeks. And so we're going to have that meeting no matter what. I'm saying that as, not the chair here, I'm the vice chair, but we're going to have that meeting no matter what. And I would encourage commissioners to have one-on-one discussions about next steps so that as we go into that, we can be resilient with what we would like to do to communicate within the scope of what we're allowed to do. As a commission, as citizens, you're on your own. But as a commission, what would the next steps be? Does that sound reasonable to people? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
So we'll include a continuation of this study session
Yes.
on the March 4th agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just do want to say that February 25th letter from the city agreeing with the initial determination that the project would have no adverse effects, which disagreed with the SHPO. I do think that's important to understand that particular, how that letter was written without the Historic Preservation Commission's participation.
Thank you very much. I believe that can conclude the study session, and we don't, on our agenda, which I've now lost, right, there are no announcements to be made in a special session like this. So I would move to adjourn.
Request.
Oh, sorry.
I would request that that Professor Altschuler share with us a more complete version of the students' work in some manner, if it could be a PDF file or something. I don't know what you have, but I'd love to see.
I actually promised MTD that I would make a book that would be a curated compilation of all the work, and I am doing my due diligence to make it done as soon as possible. Can't promise it by March 4th, but I'll do my best.
In future, it would be just so great to celebrate your students' work and to appreciate it and include it in the thought process in the future. Well, let's keep our promise and then share.
So with that, I would move to adjourn. I just call the adjournment, actually. So it is, thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. I've lost here it is, my phone clock. It's 9:02 p.m., 2 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you.